Well, good morning, one and all across the globe. You join us back once again in the Euroformula Open Championship ahead of round 3 of the 2025 season. We've arrived at HOCKENHEIMRING in Germany, and already the championship has taken many turns, with finally getting over the line Timoš Kaharčík after a very close battle with Jevon David in the opening race at Spa. He finally has sailed to victory in the final 2 races of asking, and now 20 or 19 points, I should say, behind current championship leader Jevon David, who is back again for the Motorpark team in his very familiar Sri Lankan lion livery. The championship leader, who was sat on the podium throughout Portimao, was sat on the podium throughout Monza as well. For the first time, featured off the podium in race 2 at Spa-Francorchamps. It looks like he's going to have many worthwhile contenders, with Michael Shin also looking to recover after a difficult race weekend at Spa, after a sequence of second places back at Portimao to open the campaign. But we are now here this time around at Hockenheimring. Mixed conditions right through the course of the weekend, with rain featuring, also little bits of sunshine. Many drivers asking questions as to what the weather's going to be doing through the course of the weekend. George Morgan back in the commentary box and returning. He wasn't with me at Spa, but he's back at Hockenheimring. It's Chris Stevens. Welcome back, Chris.
Oh, thank you, George. It's so good to be back with this fabulous championship, and in mixed conditions. This qualifying session has been declared wet, so the wet Pirelli tyres are available to these drivers. They do have to have their rain lights on, and we can see some of the slippery surface flags are already being waved across the circuit as the drivers venture out there for the first time. I'm told many of them were not really willing to put the risk in the wet qualifying session, or practice sessions, I should say, that we had yesterday with slick tyres, in case such conditions did arise throughout the race weekend itself. And it seems like they're going to need that experience now as we build on to the first flying laps of this session. But I'm sure many of them still taking it very gently out there in these early stages of qualifying.
I would agree. Already, though, you can see there just a lot of tyre warming just to get ready for the, should we say, the crunch laps, where they'll look to obviously register their fast lap time, 17 minutes and 35 to take you through the rest of the session. We can just bring you up to speed as well. Of course, we've spoken a little bit about points already this morning. We've got 2 different pole sitters so far this season. Timoš Kaharčík actually opening his account straight from the get-go back at Portimao, but if you remember, had issues getting off the line. A few drivers struggling with the clutch pedal system that they do have on this Dallara 324 chassis. Of course, a feature that we had on the 320 as well years prior, but has now finally found his feet at Spa. We now have a really extraordinary battle between both Kaharčík and David, and that was illustrated back in our first race back at Spa last time, where they went wheel to wheel. It looked like Kaharčík was going to get his first of potentially 3 through the course of that weekend, until Jevon David, in the final moments, came through around the outside, coming into the penultimate corner, coming through towards the bus stop chicane, and eventually snatching a major victory here to his locker ahead of the Spa weekend. But it was Kaharčík who returned the serve back, not just once, but twice.
I certainly did, and it's our 2 most popular drivers in the YouTube comment section, let's say, who are leading the way at the moment. Just noticed there is a bit of dirt on the apex of turn 9. That might be why there was a slippery surface flag out. Bit of dirt that's been dragged across from the curbing. They did just have the touring cars out here, which has done these single-seater drivers no favours at all. And we saw on the onboard there with Jevon David, there is spots of rain out there. You can just see some of them on this camera as well. It is starting to spit out there. And so there might not be time to build up to the lap. You might have to just get a lap in quickly before the conditions really start to deteriorate. 1:39 is the first flying lap, and that is about 5 seconds off of the pace that Jevon David set in a dry FP1 yesterday.
Yeah, which obviously means now is the time, really, if you're going to start setting laps. Time is of the essence here at this stage, obviously, should the track get a lot worse. But there's Paolo Brajnik returning back to the series as well once again. He's making his way through the first sector, coming out of turn 2 and turn 3. Jevon David starting to pick up the pace now. 1.4 seconds improvement already on what he has already set, or should we say on top of Timoš Kaharčík. But as you can see there, a lot of wheel play here on part of Timoš Kaharčík. Obviously the balance may be suffering a little bit under this very slippery surface we have here at Hockenheim.
Yeah, locked the front left under braking for turn 8, and if there is rain, this is the part of the circuit that's going to be very, very tricky, where the asphalt of the circuit. Oh, as he struggles again through the Sachs curve. But, oh, and that was a car in the gravel. Who was behind? Was it Paolo Brajnik who was just behind Evan David? I don't think it was, but we'll keep an eye on it. Annoyingly, it's just out of view. As Evan David again struggles. That asphalt there, the drag strip for those last couple of corners, is really, really slippery. It's Jose Garfias who ended up in the gravel at
red flag.
The Sachs curve. We have a red flag because those rear Pirellis are spinning away. FIFA Barrichello has also spun down at the final corner as well. So this asphalt, this super dark drag strip asphalt, as soon as you put a little bit of water on it, zero grip. You're a complete passenger.
And it's important to note that we're coming away from two tracks that are very elevation conscious, but when you come to Hockenheimring, a lot flatter in comparison, as you can so rightly say. So that sheet of wet weather that comes across essentially turns this circuit into an ice rink. You have to be very wary with where you apply yourself in terms of braking and throttle application. It's going to be very intriguing to see what the teams decide to do now, because we saw them testing right through the weekend. They were very fortunate in many ways that they had both sessions where FP1 was essentially a dry session, FP2 was deemed a wet session. The time, of course, the fastest time we did see across the weekend, Evan David, incidentally the man on your screen, 1:34.136. That was done under dry conditions on a 22.7 degrees Celsius track temperature. Now, there wasn't any difference in terms of the temperatures, neither on the track or in the air. It was just simply due to that wet layer that was on top of the circuit, which in FP2 meant that he lapped as well to the top with a 1:46.769. So that is an overwhelming 12 seconds of difference between wet and dry.
George, if we get how long on this red flag is, as we see the struggle, all bounced over the curb there, did Evan David. Surprised he didn't go skating off into the barriers there, as how little grip there is out there. But depending on how much it continues to rain and how long this red flag is, they might have to just bail on the slicks and go straight onto the wet tyres. Because if they're struggling this much on the slicks, and it'll be even harder to get them up to temperature next time around as well, as Jose Garfias out of the car. Had a bit of an awakening in Spa, did Jose Garfias, and it was not the pace in the first round that we really expected to see from Garfias, but was a little bit more on the money in Spa. But this is not a particularly strong weekend start to his weekend for him. Michael Shin there, I believe one of only two drivers who has raced here before on this grid, himself and Fernando Barrichello, because of course they were racing in this championship last year, whereas I don't believe anyone else has raced here in other championships as well.
Yeah, well, as you can see now, very busy pit lane as we take a look. Raoul Hyman conversing as well with the rest of the Motorpark team in the background as they look to discuss as to what the correct measures will be heading back out onto the circuit. They're still currently embracing that dry tyre at the moment. No signs of any changes just yet, as we now wait and see when they're about to head back out. There is Diego Della Torre, just waiting to get started once again. They are starting to call him Diego Della Danger in the Motorpark garage at the moment. I can assure you it's all out of warmth and love. I can say that for sure. But I have to say, looking at his previous results, he has been a threat to many of the best drivers on this grid, and has certainly flourished ever since we saw him back at Portimao, where he was digging deep for better results. Of course, he achieved his first podium of the season back at Spa. In our very first race of asking, was unfortunately a retiree in race 2, but came back again for points in race 3. More to come, though, from young Torre. Of course, one of two Mexicans we do have on this circuit. Of course, we allude to Jose Garfias, who had a trip into the gravel, but also made his FIA F3 debut back at Spain last weekend as well, but had an unfortunate coming together with Polish driver Roman Belinsky coming through turn 2. But after speaking to Jose Garfias, he's taken a lot away from that. It was a very short window for him joining the F3 Championship for that one brief stint at the start of the week. It was actually on Monday when he got the call, so had the pleasure of embracing FIA F3 cars for the first time of asking. But we welcome him back once again here in the Euroformula.
Pit lane to open in just over 30 seconds time, so we'll get back under green conditions shortly, and one of the Nielsen cars already waiting patiently at the end of pit lane. Slight bit of housekeeping. BVM down to just one car for this weekend with no Vladislav Ryabov present. I believe budget issues for the 19-year-old just hampering his full season progress. So Timit Kaharchek, the sole BVM representative, and thinking about the decisions to go from wets to slicks or slicks to wets or whatever you've got to do, BVM can focus all of their attention on their one car, whereas a team like Motorpark, they've got 6 drivers to think about. So that is something we'll end up thinking about across the course of the 3 races. Green flags now waving around the circuit. We are back again with just under 14 and a half minutes left in the session, and the car that went straight out was Finn Green, yet to actually set a lap time in this session. He's followed out by his teammate Sean Rashid, and then Diego Della Torre heading out onto the circuit just behind them as well. Nielsen Racing, of course, will be racing at the 24 Hours of Le Mans next weekend. The test day is tomorrow, so they've got an awful lot of the team over at Le Mans already. But team boss Sven Thompson is still here this weekend, and well, I think that rather goes to show the commitment that Sven is putting towards this single-seater project for the team. He will be heading over to Le Mans during next week.
Yeah, obviously very much a passion of Sven Thompson, of course, with Nielsen embarking on their debut season here in the Euroformula Open Championship. And as we discuss that, here is Finn Green, who is now making his way around the circuit. Of course, a new acquisition to the Euroformula this season. Still looking to find his feet in the car. Remember, did not actually take part in any pre-season testing leading up to the first round at Portimao. So it was very much a voyage of adventure for young Finn Green, who has had his fair share of trials and tribulations, but I'm sure further points will be on show soon enough, I'm sure. 2 10th place finishes at Portimao with an 8th place finish in race 2. Had his first retirement though in race 2 back at Spa, so we're looking to bounce back this time around at Hockenheimring, much like this young man, Fernando Barrichello, who scooped up a wonderful podium finish back in race 2 at Spa as well. Of course, this being his 2nd season running here in this championship. Of course, son of former Formula 1 driver Rubens Barrichello, who is back in the Brazilian stock car as well this season. But I'm sure that Rubens will be watching on and cheering his son on, I am sure.
I'm sure they'll both be heading to Le Mans next week as well to cheer on the other Barrichello, Eduardo Barrichello, making his Le Mans debut, I think, if memory serves correctly. And they're taking it very cautiously on this outlap, aren't they? Because they've already seen what can happen if you get it wrong, particularly
still
into the Sachs curve. Yeah. Everyone's still out there on slicks. Nowhere near wet enough for the wets, and the rain hasn't increased in any sort of intensity. So if it is raining, it's still just a bit of drizzle out there. It's more like the sort of psychological rain, really. But I'm sure they will have to be careful on these first flying laps. We've already seen.
Well, Diego certainly not holding back at the moment, 19.9. So the pace is starting to pick up a little bit in the early goings of the session. He's just gone purple again as Diego in the middle sector with a 45.0 as Ed Pearson waits to get back underway in the garage.
I wonder if this means as well that they won't use 2 sets of tyres in the qualifying session. So if you're new to the Euroformula Open Championship, they get 4 sets of slicks. Now, if you do 2 runs in qualifying with 2 new sets, that means you won't have a new set for 1 of the 3 races we have this weekend.
Yep.
So you need to make a compromise. God, that was a compromise through the Nord curve for Diego Della Torre, just as he went fastest on a 34.2, so just shy of the fastest lap we've seen so far this weekend, but we're definitely getting onto the right pace now. But he had a big swapper through the first corner, and that is a high-speed incident if you lose it there.
Yeah, obviously a very, very close moment there, unfortunately, for Diego Della Torre coming through the Nord curve, but back out onto the circuit, and it's already, well, he's up on his time, but obviously we'll have to wonder whether that time will be allowed as he makes his way down through towards the very, very tight right-hander. You're almost turning back on yourself here at this point before you then venture into Sector 2 proper, where you meet of course, the Harum Scarum Turn 9 eventually, which will take you through to the stadium section, which we get to actually overlook from the commentary box. We have such a great visual guide as to where everyone is out on track in the third sector. Let's take a look at the moment again. This is Diego Della Torre coming through Turn 1, a big snap heading through towards the first bend, and just rumbles over that curb as well, but well done him. He managed to rescue it well.
Dab of Oppo and just gathered it up very nicely, and it is a horrible curb out there. that you have to try and navigate on the exit. It's very big, it's very bouncy, it's very uncomfortable, particularly for these very low-slung single-seater machines. And bails out of the lap in the end, so we've done 2 fastest sectors. Now, I wonder if that means they are, in fact, going to go for a fresh set of slick tyres on that car. Out comes Ed Pearson. Now, he's been sat there waiting patiently in pit lane, and he's just heading out onto the track now. Pearson's going against the grain here of what everyone else is doing, and I'm curious to see what this means. Well, presumably this means he's only using 1 set, maybe? I don't know, we'll find out later.
Doesn't obviously want to risk too much at the very early stage of the session, so, you know, I mean, track position is obviously important, as anything is, and obviously the drivers are going to pick their moments to head out onto the circuit, because ideally they want 1 clear run. They don't want to put too much strain onto the Pirelli rubber. Of course, this track can, of course, apply high deg, as Finn Green goes second fastest now, 1.8 off the top, nearly 1.9 away from Diego Della Torre. Incidentally, the time that Diego Della Torre has put in place, very close to Yevon David's fastest FP1 time that we saw right at the start of the weekend of the 1:34.136. So at this point, we're looking at 64,000 smack on, 60 4 thousandths of a second difference between the two. Diego Della Torre not wasting any time, straight back out as Barrichello now goes second fastest with a time that's just under 1.5 tenths of a second away from Della Torre's fastest lap. As now we watch as the 69 belonging to Finn Green. Will it be green again for Finn Green as he crosses the line? Shall we see whether that improvement comes in? Certainly a purple final sector for Barrichello helps. Green in the first 2, green in the third for Finn Green. And that brings it down to 1.1, but a ways off where our top 2 currently stand.
So just under 8 minutes left in the session. Finn Green going through, followed by the BVM car. This is Fernando Barrichello, new race engineer for FIFO this weekend. His regular engineer Rolf Druckenmüller not here this weekend, so it's Matteo Seeliger that he has on the other end of his radio as we ride on board with the championship leader Yevon David heading towards the hairpin. It's an awfully big stop that he was heading towards, but this is Barrichello with a personal best in the first sector, and that dirt through turn number 9 that has been cleared away a little bit. There's a bit of a racing line that's been forged through there. Timit Kaharczyk now goes fastest, having gone purple in the third sector, a 1:33.602. That's the fastest lap we've seen this weekend. Barrichello makes his way through the Sachs curve, and he's backed out of the lap, and I'm not sure why, but maybe because of the traffic just in front of him, but he had 2 personal bests up until that point. Here's Yevon David into the stadium section now, rejoining the old Grand Prix circuit. They used to head through the hills here and fighting the steering wheel so much through the Sachs curve, not wanting to do what Jose Garfias did, a bit of a Sebastian Vettel down there at that gravel trap. Wrestling the car again through these last couple of corners. Out over to the curbing and heads up towards the timing line, which is quite a far way down the start-finish straight. And Yevon David ends up only 7th with that and still 2 seconds off the pace. So looks like he's still building towards a good one, but Kaharczyk is flying in the first sector.
Yeah, back again after his first 2 victories of the season and seemingly has not run out of pace, at least any of it has to be said. Again, 4.5 tenths up in that middle as well, based on our fastest time that he's already registered, but has since had that time deleted by the looks of it as well by the stewards. So that has now been removed after track limits, I believe, at turns 1 and turns should I say turn 1, I should say. So a mistake coming through the first sector, but this time could yet register him fastest. Here comes Timit Kaharczyk now up towards the line as he now sprints through towards the line. Indeed, it will be faster, and by a whole second faster than what we saw in free practice. 1 second faster plus, and now sits at the top, but has had it taken away again.
My goodness, and Yevon David, meanwhile, has gone fastest in the first sector, so Kaharczyk has got some really good speed. He just needs to keep it in between the white lines. Yevon David with a personal best in the middle sector to go with his purple first sector as well. Let's see where this puts him. He was fighting the car through this third sector last time around. Again, still needs some opposite lock through the Sachs curve. Left kink, right kink. And set yourself up for these last 2 corners. A bounce over the curb. Don't want to get over onto the drag strip asphalt on the left-hand side there. And again, drives up towards the timing line, does the Sri Lankan, and still only 8th fastest. I'm not sure about that.
Well, interesting
Because
stuff.
it was fastest in the final.
Fastest in the final, and in the middle he was green as well, personal best, and wasn't too far off anyone else in the middle, so maybe just a little error on the timing screen as we look at it and wait for it to update.
Well, that was a 33.3 that he did, so I just wonder if there's some sort of timing.
That would make him faster than Shin at the very
100%.
top of the order. So.
Yeah, not sure what's going on there with the timekeeping.
Well, we'll wait and see. Timek Kaharczyk has got purple again, though, in the middle sector as well, and that's a 44. Incidentally, obviously, remember, Kaharczyk registering a fastest lap over the last course coming around the circuit, but has already had 2 times deleted. Here comes now Timek Kaharczyk once again to try and right the wrong, and this time places his car to the top ahead of Michael Shin, a former race winner around here, and by over a second, 1.1 in fact, goes fastest with a blistering 1:32.851 with 4 minutes to go.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. I think it's good.
I think so.
Oh, that's not good.
No, that's not good. The 32 belonging to Sean Rashid, taking a little bit of a trip just off circuit there, but we've seen a little bit of that already this weekend. Obviously, still the drivers trying to cope with the tricky conditions that are out there on show, but Kaharczyk registering now the fastest time once again, could be on the cusp of making it 2 poles in 3 rounds, which would be an exceptional visit once again this time, as Diego Della Torre remains second fastest now, ahead of Michael Shin this time, who's now dropped down to 3rd place. So the Mexican now back up into the top 2 places. Yevon David now back into 3rd fastest within 8.5 tenths of a second away from Timek Kaharczyk at the top of the shop, or if you want to go further than that, 8.25 tenths of Kaharczyk at the top of the shop. So the 2 main championship runners at the moment starting to converge together once again. Ed Pearson goes into 4th fastest too, so now we're seeing those times trickle down more so, and Diego Della Torre is purple in the 1st sector.
Yeah, he's flying out there, just coming through the hairpin at turn number 6 now, so 1/10.5 up on what Kaharczyk managed to do on his lap. Heading up towards the kink at turn number 7. Should still be flat out, despite the slightly slippery conditions in one of these machines. And then this real technical part of the lap, so many curved traction zones, lateral traction zones as the drivers like to call them. And now 2 tenths up in the middle sector. It's purple again for the Mexican as he heads into the stadium section. And around the Sachs curve, Diego Della Torre, who has yet to really show his nose so much in this championship. Just 1 podium finish to his name so far this year. He's sliding the car around. We heard the scream of Pirelli rubber around the penultimate corner. Heads up towards the timing line. How has that affected the overall lap? It's still a good one. It's still an improvement, but it's only a 32.9 and just under a 10th away from Kaharczyk.
This could yet be Diego Della Torre's finest qualifying session to date. He could yet feature on the front row coming into race 1, only 91 thousandths away from Timek Kaharczyk's fastest time. We've still got personal bests on show as well. Michael Shin, who we of course alluded to being a former race winner around here, won race 3 here last season, did the South Korean, obviously representing Motor Park team once again for this campaign. A Motor Park who have dominated around this track from years and years in the past. They did it with Marino Sato and Yuki Tsunoda back in 2019. We were supposed to race here back in 2020, but of course, remember, COVID-19 hit. We now return again, certainly last year and now back again this year. But Motor Park certainly looking in full flow. Benavides, a winner around here last year. Francesco Simonazzi, however, broke the trend for BVM Racing, who are now looking for Kaharczyk to break the trend again this time around in this round 3 of the 2025 season. Michael Shin, though, finding plenty of time in the 1st and 2nd sector. He currently stands just beyond 8.25 tenths off the pace of Kaharczyk right now, but that could yet be brought down with a stellar final sector should he be able to harness it. It was just under 2.5 tenths off coming out of the middle. Here comes Shin across the line, will go 3rd fastest and topple Yevon David down into 4th.
Nice of Motor Park to add some of the green trim to Michael Shin's cars. 1 less red and black machine on the grid. That makes our life a little bit easier. But yeah, Michael Shin, very difficult weekend for him in Spa, where he was a bit of a magnet for trouble, I'm afraid. But 3rd place, it's a decent start to the weekend, but half a second off Kaharczyk. And so just goes to show the job that the top 2 are doing out there at the moment. We are 2 seconds away from the checkered flag. So who is on a good lap? out there at the moment. Check flag now does fly, and the timing screen is full of white, I'm afraid, as Shin is heading his way back to the pits. Everett Stack about to cross the timing line, but this lap isn't really anything to shout about. Didn't improve on that lap, so he remains in 6th, and currently that would be pole position for the reverse grid race 3. Ed Pearson's come into pit lane. Diego De La Torre suddenly put a good one in the first sector. It's not an improvement, but it is up on what Kahacek did on his provisional pole lap. Now remember, De La Torre lost time in the 3rd sector, but he's lost time in the middle sector on this lap as well. So I think that is about to be all she wrote, George. And with Kahacek into the pits as well, it looks like it is going to be the pole. Whee! Michael Shin very nearly getting into the gravel and into a bit of trouble at the final corner. Didn't improve on that last lap, unsurprisingly. And so Timothy Kahacek on pole position.
Timothy Kahacek, the pole, back on pole here this time in the Euroformula Championship for a 2nd time here this campaign, and so that's 2 in the corner for him and 1 of course after Spa for Yevon David. Here we take a look at the replay, just dipping that rear left into the gravel before re-entering, coming out of the final corner at turn 17, but it's now starting to quieten down in the pit lane. There is of course number 3 with his 2nd pole position this campaign, Timothy Kahacek, who comes into this round 2nd of the championship on 102 points. He's just added another point to his championship allocation, so that will place him on 103 points, bringing that gap a little bit closer to Yevon David, but we'll need some big results throughout the course of the weekend. Definitely looks like he's coming into grips with the Dallara 324, Chris, as we now run through the classification. Timothy Kahacek, your pole sitter ahead of race 1 coming up this afternoon for BVM Racing. I'm sure Giuseppe Mazzotti is delighted with that. Diego De La Torre with his fastest lap as well that we have seen ushered in all weekend, and also on top of that his best qualifying performance to date as well for Team Motor Park. Michael Shin in 3rd, last year's race winner in race 3, back in 3rd place this time. Yevon David in 4th, Ed Pearson in 5th, Everett Stack in 6th, Fernando Barrichello in 7th, Finn Green in 8th, Paolo Brajnik as well down in 9th place, and Jose Garfias, who was unable to set an improved run, obviously having some misadventures into the gravel on the way around in his initial laps, just could not quite get comfortable towards the back end of the session. Sean Rashid finishing down in 11th place as well, but it's Timothy Kahacek with a 1:32.851 that now sees him to the top, and he definitely does seem in a good vein of form at the moment, Chris.
He certainly does, and with his nearest title rival, Yevon David, starting down in 4th position, it's a good opportunity this weekend for him to make up some points.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously coming in after competing in the GB3 last year, took 4 wins and 3 poles, 11 podiums that campaign, and now flourishing in the Dallara 324 chassis. And no question, he's going to be, I'm sure, a stellar rival for Yevon David through the course of this championship. We still look back fondly at the first race at Spa-Francorchamps that saw them come wheel to wheel down at the bus stop chicane. But we can now hear from him right now with Alfredo.
Timothy Kahacek, good way to start the morning.
Yeah, a bit surprising to be fair. You know, it's my first trip to Hockenheim, my first proper dry session on this track. So, yeah, quite surprising, but happy overall. Didn't do a big mistake on the drying track, and yeah, happy to deliver.
And the conditions changing all the time. How you see that factor?
Yeah, it was tricky in the beginning, especially because I thought like you could get only 1 lap in, and you probably that's it. But yeah, in the end, we put on the 2nd set, and it was dry. So yeah, a bit tricky in the beginning, especially. But yeah, you know, in these conditions, you just have to perform. You have to not to do any mistake, and that's what I did.
We'll see later then.
Yep.
All the best.
So Timothy Kahacek on pole position ahead of race 1 coming up later on this afternoon. Do join us at 1 local time here at Hockenheimring. Till then, we'll see you soon. Goodbye.